Welcome to the GEM series, powered by Rocket Level. On this podcast, we empower entrepreneurs to succeed by setting big goals, executing like a pro, and having a fearless mindset. The GEM series is all about investing in yourself. We're here to share the path to getting what you want out of life by sharing the stories of entrepreneurs who have done this themselves, providing thorough research from our team on what careers and habits are yielding the best results, and discussing the mindset it takes to overcome the obstacles that all future entrepreneurs will face. Investing in yourself starts with putting in the work every single day, and this podcast is here to help you do exactly that. My name is Blake Chapman. I'm the Vice President of the Ambassador Program here at Rocket Level, and I am thrilled to be your host for the GEM series.
Today, I am pleased to welcome another incredible guest to the GEM series, Allie Boone. And I'm really excited to get to talk to you today, Allie. Just to give you guys a little tiny bit of background, she has a degree in aerospace engineering. And during that process, found out, that she wasn't necessarily an engineer, but an entrepreneur that is extremely multifaceted. Allie does anything from competitive rowing, flies airplanes, literally teaches people how to fly them. Loves being in the great outdoors, is a published conference paper author, and she founded Hipster Investments, which is amazing. It's one of the leading companies working with turnkey rental properties, having facilitated over 18 million in turnkey sales in just the first 5 years of business. You've got a great life resume, Allie. I hope you don't mind me bragging on you a little bit.
That actually makes me sound very exciting. I'm like, oh, I've calmed down a lot.
I mean, reading that paragraph, you can hear it in my voice. I got excited. So no, I'm so excited to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here to do an in-person. Like the whole world is online and Zoom these days, like to actually get to meet other people who are doing similar things. And it's amazing.
I'm always happy to get to meet people in general, but the in-person is a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We've gotten to, have a little bit of coffee, talk off camera. It's always a lot of fun. So for those that don't know you, Allie, could you just tell the audience just a little snippet about yourself?
Well, my name's Allie. I like walks on the beach. Just kidding. I do like the beach. So I grew up in Atlanta, where we are.
Awesome.
And it was a very standard, go to school, get good grades, get a secure job, work it, save your money, retire kind of thing. So I did that. And that's why I got into engineering. I was flying airplanes before that, and I didn't want the pilot life. So I was like, I'm sure engineering is going to be exactly the same thing. It's going to pay way more. That was 100% not accurate. But I did the master's degree in that because I was following, I think at that time, I didn't know there was another option. Yeah. That's what the world did. And so I did that. And before I ever sat down in my first cubicle, I looked around and I was like, this isn't gonna, I knew. I hadn't even sat down yet. I was like, I gotta get out of here. So literally the next 5 years, it was a job I'm very grateful for. It was a lot of people's dream job. It just wasn't my dream job.
Sure.
And so I spent 5 years trying to figure out how to get out because I had skills, like I could fly airplanes, but it wasn't anything practical for how somebody leaves corporate. And I was reading every book I could get my hands on. I was motivated. I was like, I cannot do business casual clothes every day. I cannot show up. I'm not a morning person. I don't like reporting to people. Like I want to be my own person. And a lot of people ask how I got into real estate. And I kind of say in a way it fell in my lap, but that makes it sound like I didn't do any work for it. But I didn't know, from all the books I was reading, do I start a business? Do I get into real estate investing? Yeah. Those seem like the things that would get somebody out of corporate. And I had decided to start a business. I didn't know what kind, but I was like, I'm going to do the business thing. Yeah. And while I was doing that, when I still had a high paid corporate paycheck every Friday, which was very convenient back in the day, I miss that on occasion. I was like, well, I might as well do something smart with my money. So I started doing some investing, and little did I know the people I was going to meet, everything just absolutely took off. And I did another investment project, which is what got me started, but very quickly turnkeys became an option because Atlanta was one of the big markets at the time. This was 2011. One of the, if not the biggest market. You could buy the cheapest houses that were renting really high. The price to rent ratios were ridiculous. And so I started doing that, and the people that I started meeting, and then everyone's like, well, what are you buying? Because you assume you have to swing hammers and flip houses and all this hands-on stuff. And I wasn't. So next thing I knew, people I knew were buying through the companies I was buying through. I started writing about it online, and then I got to reach out from bigger pockets, and they're like, hey, do you want to write for us?
Cool.
And from that point on, it just skyrocketed to, it was not that turnkeys were new at the time, but it was something people hadn't necessarily known about or considered. And during the crash, it was amazing because you could buy everything so cheap.
Yeah.
So that's really what started. And that was, so this month, well, September 2022 is the 10-year anniversary of me leaving corporate, which is
wow.
Crazy.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
I'm like, wow, that's been a roller coaster.
Yeah.
But it's been so awesome too. But over that 10 years, it's been interesting to see how the whole thing evolves, because not only has my company been evolving, the real estate market has been evolving just constantly. And so things have shifted. You know, we've been through the whole COVID thing. What's real estate going to do then?
Yeah.
And a few years ago, I started doing just real estate investing coaching on the side. But during COVID, especially when people were suddenly locked into their houses, no pun intended, since we were talking investing, I started doing a lot more coaching. So that's really built up. And my big focus now, I still do tons with turnkeys, but I absolutely love new investors, investor psychology, the mindset, because that's what I feel like most people aren't talking about, because you know, there's no emotions in real estate investing. It's all about the numbers. And like, okay, kind of, but also it's scary. And none of us know what we're doing. We didn't learn this in school.
No.
And so that is now kind of what I've started focusing on, is the things that would have helped me get started to make it less complicated, you know, increase my chances for success, find a strategy that works, instead of being like, well, I should flip houses. Okay, well, maybe, you know, so that's been a really rewarding thing. I still love helping people with turnkeys, but kind of getting into the newer investor side of things has just been so fun for me, more rewarding. So that's kind of that's how we got here.
That is incredible. You know, it gave me a flashback to my first corporate job, where I had the cubicle and I was sitting there going, is this the rest of my life? I was like, I don't know. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it just, I had a similar moment, I think, where I was like, you know, I just really don't feel like I'm going to make the kind of impact where I'm going to be passionate enough about what I'm doing right now to be even worthwhile to be here, probably.
I was pointless.
You know?
I was such a waste of their salary.
Exactly.
And I think, you know, there are people that absolutely love what they do, and there's nothing wrong with corporate. It's just that, you know, it's so important for like I said, I ended as a top secret flight test engineer, and I was traveling out to top secret places. Like it really was a dream job. Yeah. But again, it wasn't my dream job. And I think that's something that's so important for people, is to look at yourself in the whole equation, not what everyone tells you should do. All that, because again, someone's dream job, not my dream job. So
yeah, absolutely right. And you know, something that I keep talking about a lot and keeps popping up is just the ability to prioritize correctly. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's one of the most essential things that sometimes we all get a little bit misguided in terms of like, okay, what is my number one priority? Yeah. So going back in time a little bit, did you have a first kind of goal in mind ever, where when you were a kid, like, you know, something that maybe indicated like, hey, maybe I will run my own business one day? Did you have anything like that growing up?
I think that would have been my entire childhood.
Really?
I was not a fan of anyone ever telling me what to do. So like, you know, I didn't know it at the time, but that was a first hint. My parents would probably attest to that.
Am I unemployable?
And the first thing I remember happening, I was 13. And I don't remember what prompted it, but I woke up one day and I was like, I'm going to make a lot of money. I was determined. And it wasn't from a pretension standpoint, but it was from a problem solving personal challenge of like, how can I make this happen? And it's been interesting with that particular mindset or idea from a kid, because as I started getting into entrepreneurship, and over the last 10 years especially, is that priority has shifted a lot. I could probably make a gajillion dollars if I wanted to, but I also like to sleep in and go to the beach. And, you know, that's something else I feel like people aren't talking about, is like, I'll be the first to say, my name's Allie and I like to sleep in. You know, like nobody wants to admit that. And but it's true. And so my happiness and my joy, it turns out it's not the dollars in the bank. That was more of a problem solving type of thing. Yeah. But I'm willing to take less dollars in exchange for living the life that I want. And same with turnkeys from an investing standpoint. I could make more dollars flipping houses and doing all that, but I want to go to the beach in the afternoon. You know, I want to sleep in and I want to go to the beach, and I absolutely cannot stand dealing with contractors. So, you know, there's that. It's been an interesting evolution from that 13-year-old, but that mindset absolutely kicked it off for sure.
Man, you know, and I think that that's something that's so important too, is whenever you are whittling it down, people talk a lot about like, oh yeah, I have to hustle nonstop. I have to do all of this. And I feel like people look at other people's definitions of financial freedom. And I'm like, why aren't you taking the time to just like figure it out for yourself? You know, we're literally all gonna die.
Not to go back to the cheesy bleak, but YOLO. But YOLO.
Yeah.
Well, and like Shark Tank is like, I love watching that show. And the sharks sit up there and they've all pretty much attested to the fact that for however long they were working 14, 16, 18, 20-hour days.
Yeah.
And granted, they are sitting in that chair because they're insane millionaires or billionaires, you know, so like the proof is in the pudding. Yeah. If you hustle like that, but I don't need $1 billion for starters. And I don't want to work 20 hours I have days where I do work 20 hours, but it's on my time. And if I want to travel, I do that instead. If I sit in the office for 20 hours, it's my choice. And so, I think some of those messages are so amazing, but like you said, it also kind of gives this impression of the only way to do this is you got to hustle. And, you know, like Instagram, and I see memes and everything, and it's all about the hustle and the grind. That is so great for a lot of people, but also we already hustle, you know, there's a lot of hustling going on. And at what point does it need to become a slowdown type of thing? So those are some of kind of the not as intuitive messages that I love. I'm like, no, go watch Netflix. Like, take a day
exactly.
off. Go watch TV. And people are like, what? I'm like, oh, sleep in while you're at it.
Well, I mean, that gives you insurance against failing out, I feel like, you know, I mean, or burning out or because that's the thing. Like, you only have so much in you until if you go like that until you get to a point where you're like, you know what? Things feel a little bigger than maybe what they actually are.
Well, if you love it,
wrapped up
do
in
it. If you
exactly,
you know, some people it's 20 hours a day and that's like heaven for them. And I've been there. Like I've worked, when I first started my company, I'd fly out of bed and I'd be on the computer. I was like, oh man, cause I was designing stuff. I was like, oh, it's so great. But also like, it's not a forever thing. And like you said, we only live, you know, a short period of time once. So make sure you're actually enjoying it. And you got to put some, you know, like I'm hustling a lot of times and I would prefer to be watching Netflix, but see, this is where I've gotten older. And like, I used to do all the cool adventure stuff. I'm like, man, I can really go watch Netflix right now. But it's you know, gauging yourself and not taking on other people's messages to us and assuming that it has to be yours.
Totally. And what is, I was just thinking about the beginning of that transition. I always love to dive into that because I think you said 5 years, right? Yeah. From 5 years, that was your plan to kind of transition out of that. What did you do to make that happen? Like,
well, that was probably my biggest hustle period. I was motivated.
Because that's when people I know are like, I'm working 40 hours here and then I'm working 40 hours or more on my own business. Like, I
mean, let's be honest. I almost want to cover up the mic so my company doesn't hear me say that. I was during work hours. I was Googling like, should I buy a hotel? Do I start like, I was never working.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
I don't know. I tried. I legitimately tried. I even went to my manager because I wasn't given a lot of product. And this is in the very beginning, as I, you know, probably starting about 3 years when I transferred to California for a different position. I was definitely working. Sure. Yeah. But maybe not as much as people would think. But I'm better at like, I remember one time one of my big positions was being a liaison between engineers and pilots because they don't understand each other at all. And I was both of them. So I could kind of translate for everybody. And I had to rewrite an operator's manual for an airplane. But like I could sit down and just grind it out really fast. So then for the next, 5 days or so, I was like, how do I get on Harper rich down, pour down?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, not that I necessarily recommend everyone using their work hours for figuring this out, but and the answer for me isn't the answer for everybody. That's what I did. I didn't know what this answer was. Like, there's no one person out there who's going to tell you, oh, if anyone tells you, here's the formula, which a lot of people do.
Yeah.
It's not the formula for you. Like, and so that's what everyone's got to figure it out for themselves as far as like, are you already doing something that makes money? Could you grow that? If you have no clue and you're like me, just start exploring and things will start kind of narrowing themselves down.
Totally.
And then, don't just go diving off unless you have some massive savings account to save you because you don't want to be super stressed the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's it can be done is kind of the point. And I think a lot of people are in a position where they don't know how they can do it. I didn't know how I could do it either.
Yeah.
And you just kind of got to start somewhere. And if you're intentional about it and you're active with it and you're trying to figure it out and you're dedicated, I think the answers will come your way at some point.
Totally. Did you bring other people into the equation, and were they pretty supportive right off the bat? Or did you have anybody that was a little like, Allie, what the hell are you doing?
I had a very secure job, high paid, aerospace engineer. I think you can imagine how my family was reacting. They're like, but they knew me at that point. They knew there was gonna be absolutely no stopping this. And they were just like, I mean, but have you considered, they were trying. So like, they were super supportive, but also nervous at the same time, which I get it. But again, they knew me at that point, and it was going to happen.
Because I don't know about you, but for some reason, I probably need to check this a little bit too. But when people say like, I don't think you should, or that seems like a bad idea, I'm kind of stubborn, and I'm like, I want to double down on it a little bit more. I don't know why, but it's
a
always
rebellion.
funny.
That's actually how I got into real estate, because I said it wasn't turnkeys that started. I got through, I think it was a Think Realty newsletter in my inbox, and I had just been touring possible rental properties in Orange County because I live in LA. And the numbers, I didn't know how to run numbers at the time, but I was like, something about this doesn't work. And so I knew nothing. And the cheapest house that was a total shack was like $270,000. And then there was gonna have to be a rehab and all that.
Yeah.
So I had all those really high numbers. So I'm sitting in my computer desk at work, and this advertisement comes through for $99,000 beach bungalows, beachfront in Nicaragua. And I was like, okay, hang on. Let me actually map Nicaragua. I was like, wait, which continent are we talking about? And I was like, oh yeah, the third world country in Central America. And immediately my rebellion was like, tell me more. Because I knew if I told people I'm suddenly buying these pre-construction bungalows in a third world country, they're going to be like, you have absolutely lost your mind. And as soon as I know that's how people are going to feel, I'm like, I got to do it.
It's time. It's time. Hey, and what happened? So did you get
nothing good?
Okay.
Oh, nothing good. It was a very aggressive start into real estate, and it was the famous developer story. And this happens in the U.S. all the time too. Is suddenly the money just nobody knows where it is. Yeah. And so I lost my very first investment attempt.
Brutal.
Was a $40,000 loss on these pre-construction things, and it was a big deal. Like they had Wyndham Hotels in on this development, Jack Nicklaus Golf Course. Like this was not like some, sketchy mom and pop kind of thing. This was a massive development. And just one day, suddenly no one really knew where the money was. And Wyndham pulled out, Nicklaus pulled out, and then everybody just kind of lost. I mean, and I was actually fortunate to have only lost 40,000. Like a lot of people had millions of their own money. Wow. It was a big deal. And so supposedly the guy, he's not even allowed in the country, and he's supposedly still building this development. I was like, oh, I'm not holding my breath on that one. So it was a frustrating start. And, that's another thing I talk to people too, is like, there's two ways to look at that. I lost $40,000, which it'd be really nice if someone wrote me that check right now. That'd be great to have. Yeah. But when I look at it, that investment literally is why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, because that's where I found out about turnkeys. That's where I met all the people that changed everything for me. And one of those people became my mentor. He was living this lifestyle design life. Yeah. And it was the first time I was looking at him and I was like, wait, you work your own schedule. You travel whenever you want to. Location independent. I was like, tell me more. Yeah. I will take your advice. Yeah. And so that prompted I ended up going to Nicaragua several times. To date, it's my favorite country. So I was like, 5 trips to Nicaragua, 10 years of entrepreneurship. I do what I want when I want. Like, it seems like $40,000 is actually a pretty decent price tag for that. Yeah. And so that's that's something for real estate investing, is things don't always go well. And not long after I lost, it was pretty confirmed that the 40 grand was gone. I had a wave with my rental properties that I had bought in Atlanta, actually. Yeah. And one was vacant for like 10 months. The property manager was about another one. It was just a waterfall. And so I had the moment of, this is stupid. Like, why am I getting in this industry? It's been nothing but a loss. Yeah. And fortunately, I had the mentor. And this is what I try and offer other people too, is he kind of sat me down and he was like, I hear you, but let's actually look at this. And we kind of mapped out, there's other profit centers of a rental property. And at the time, because of the crash, all those properties had appreciated stupid amounts of money. So it's like, okay, the lack of cash flow and paying a mortgage the whole time is frustrating, but are we in the negative? And so he kind of talked me off the cliff. And so I had that moment of like, okay, maybe I give it a couple more years, because so far real estate was not proving itself to me, was the point of that.
Yeah,
I was like, this industry sucks.
I am not sold on this right now. This is
expensive investment. What are you talking about? All I'm doing is shelling out money.
Yeah.
But, you know, now 10 years later, looking back, hands down, best investments I've ever made, both, you know, just to still have the properties. $40,000 got me all of this, you know, and so it is real estate isn't always easy. And so like, if you hit that big hiccup, it doesn't mean it's over. And I think people tend to quit early.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
As you know, I was seeing one of my rental properties before I was here. And, you know, I'm losing a lot on it right now because it's vacant. The mortgage is going out. It's got big repairs coming. But people focus on just that kind of localized issue. But it's like, when I look at it, the cash flow is coming back. Like it's a hiccup. It's not a permanent thing. So, you know, I think that's one of the biggest things of this industry is just don't quit right away, because when you do, you're getting out too soon.
Yeah.
Unless you're truly losing sleep at night. It's not an industry for everybody. Don't lose sleep at night. If you're losing sleep, just it doesn't matter what the returns are. Don't do it. But if you have an interest in it, don't let the downfalls take you out.
Yeah. I mean, that's where the mindset stuff that you're talking about 100%. Seems so essential. I mean, if people even just sharing this story right now, I would imagine there's people, I mean, I'm curious about getting into real estate and learning this kind of stuff too. And you know, when I hear that,
on.
I know, right?
It's safer with a helmet.
Yeah.
Or put a little helmet on your wallet. It'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Cause I'm like, okay, that's a good reminder of like what you can actually get into. And then with the investment that you shared about the potential loss or the loss that you experienced, I mean, yeah, it seems like that's something like a good reminder for everybody, is that all of these things are in a career or anything that you're trying to do. All of these things are potentials to send you down a bunny trail of like whatever the next best thing is.
Yeah.
And it's so important to take stock of that so that you can actually look back and fill your tank up and be like, all right, I got something from it. It's always propelling me forward, you know, because I don't know. It just gets me excited hearing that story that you shared.
And two things out, like in response to what you're saying, is like, so many people have a fear of failure with real estate investing. Yeah. And I get it, because there's a lot of money on the line sometimes.
Totally.
And so the fear of failure is a major holdback for people, but you have to look at it like, if a mistake real estate is on the job training. Like you can get a certain amount of training beforehand just to hopefully prevent the big things from happening.
Yeah.
But in 10 years of having my rental properties, I'm still learning new things. And some of them seem so minor and dumb. I should have known it years ago. But it's a perspective thing of, if there's a failure, how do you reframe it into a learning and a lesson? Because if you can't do that as a real estate investor, you're hosed, because you will fail.
Totally.
If you have enough properties for long enough, hands down, something weird's going to happen constantly. So that's one thing. And then, you know, with all of this said, it's really easy, I feel like, for people to take it to mean, oh, just, you know, no holds barred, bottoms up, do whatever. Do it safely. Like with my $40,000, I was a single person with a high paid corporate job. I could afford to lose that. And that was one when I went for this bungalow. I was like, okay, what is the worst case scenario here? Like truly, and everyone should ask this about any investment. And can you afford to lose it? So let's say you buy a little $100,000 rental property and you put $20,000 into it. Can you afford to lose the $20,000? Because I was fortunate that I was single with a high paid job. But if somebody has a family of 5 kids and this is their savings, maybe don't do that, you know, or do something less risky.
You know, I was actually thinking about that the other day, because I was like, you know, we all tell ourselves, and I believe in this too, is focus on the positive impact you can make and the positive impact that something can have on your life and what you want. But also consider the negative, you know, and so that you can be realistic of like, hey, am I being wise here? Yeah. You know, because it might mean you have a little more prep work to do. Yeah. You know,
and like when I left corporate, I didn't have the nest egg I should have had. I should have had way more in savings. But again, I had 2 dogs at the time. But if I'm going to take anyone out, I'm only taking myself out. I'm not taking my entire family out.
Totally.
You know, and so it's, you know, I just always want to be really careful of promoting like, yeah, it'll be fun. No big deal. If you lose 40 grand, just reframe it. It'll be great. But, you know, also do that wisely too. Looking at your own situation, looking at, are you going to lose sleep at night? Like that's not worth it. are you putting your family at risk? And I know there's a guy right now that has exactly $30,000 in his savings account and he wants to invest all 30,000. I'm like, ugh. Look, if you want to do it, but if you do it, I'm going to have given you so many warnings. Like, I don't want you to be in that position. You need a nest egg for emergencies. And so, always taking toll of what is applicable for you. Yeah.
When did you, so 2012, you kicked things off. When did you start seeing the kind of like, oh, I'm starting to see some traction in the way that I want to, like, and what was that experience like when things started picking up a little bit?
Let's see. So I started buying them in 2011. 2012 was kind of the rough year. That was a big vacancy, like everything. I would imagine probably by 2013, everything was catching up. But back then, remember, the price to rent ratios were crazy. Yeah. Like the cash flow was so high. And people even now are like, oh, what kind of cash flow do you make on your properties? I'm like, you don't want to know. Like, because you'll never get it. You can't get it right now.
Yeah.
But so like pretty immediately when everything was full, I was making pretty good returns on it. And then over the years, Atlanta appreciated huge. So all of those, I wish if I had not been a brand new real estate investor then, I would have found a way to buy so many. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, right?
Sure.
But what's been the most eye-opening for me has just happened this year, really, is so now fast forward 10 years on all these properties.
Totally.
And I knew this at the time, but I did not think that hard about it. And I didn't really put any stake in it, is rent increases. So the property I just saw as I was driving here, God bless it. I told you the story of, we'll dive into like real estate bloopers at some point. But so that property was the house that I lived in when I lived in Atlanta. And I got the job offer in California right in the middle of the crash.
Yeah.
So I bought that house in August of 2008. Well, guess how long I owned it before the entire bottom fell out of the market? So in less than 6 months, the value from what I had just paid for that house went to less than half. And I was like, oh, another good start. Like, this is so great.
You're like, you are killing me here.
How I'm in real estate today, I have no idea. So the value went to half. So when I was moving, obviously I wasn't going to sell it. So I was like, I guess we'll rent it out. And at that time, like all the properties I work with now are big positive cash flow properties, and everybody wants cash flow. So if you like cash flow, meaning the money left over after you pay your expenses every month. So that house I rented out for $995 at the time, and my mortgage was right at $995. So technically it was a break-even property, technically negative with expenses. And a lot of people today won't touch anything break even. But I didn't have a choice at the time. It was that or sell it for less than half of what I just freaking bought it for. So $995 break even. And it's for rent right now. We just got an application approved, and she's about to be paying $1,800. In that time, my mortgage has only gone up with taxes and insurance to $1,100. So my break-even property, which was the lowest cash flow property of all of them, is now about to be cash flowing $700 a month. Oh, okay. When people are thinking of financial freedom, they're like, oh, each property is only going to make $150 to $200 a month. So I need so many of them. That's crazy. The rent increases are crazy. And I just had another property that's not in nearly as good of an area. I don't know what the mortgage on that one is now, but it originally rented. It was the very first turnkey I ever bought, and it was renting for $975 at the time. And I only paid $55,000 for this house, 2 stories, fully renovated.
Wow.
Everything. So 55, that's the price to rent ratio I'm talking about. $55,000 for a $975 rent is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they just renewed her lease at $1,800. So
that's just
whatever
what it costs now.
I think my mortgage is maybe $600, give or take, not more than $700 a month.
Dang.
And it's $1,800 now.
Wow.
So that just this year, the 10-year look back, and a couple of them haven't gone up as much just because like one has a woman who's been in there forever and the original property manager wasn't increasing rent. So the other ones have room for it. But like these two, it just, I did not take that seriously of now, if someone were to try and sell let's see, I paid, so that one, $55,000 renting for $1,800. Are you kidding me? And that's what I'm working with now. And so that is where, like, while they were profitable in the beginning, And now like the house, I was talking about the tank to less than half the value.
Yeah.
It's almost double the value now.
Wow.
So it's like, with rental properties in particular, they are long-term investments, not to say you can't be profitable in the short term, but when you hold them, I'm only at the 10-year mark and they are stupidly profitable for the reasons I knew intellectually, but I hadn't seen and experienced.
Yeah.
But rents are going to keep going up. Values are going to keep going up. Inflation is a beast right now, which makes everything go up. So, I mean, my 10 years is when I saw the like, oh, okay, here's the profits.
It's really, really starting to all hit. Yeah. That's pretty incredible. I mean, and what do you think gave you that kind of mental because I know you talked about your mentor was gratefully helpful. Like, do you have any advice on mental resiliency going through all of this? Because I know there's like, there's so many ups and downs. And like when people talk about, 10 years, it's hard to it's hard to envision a decade from now, you know?
Yeah, 10 years has gone by very fast.
I believe
it's also been very slow and very fast all at the same time. You know, I think the mental resilience, I was fortunate, I think, and I don't say this every day, it depends on what day you ask me about this, is I am so desperate to stay out of corporate and so desperate to keep working for myself that I feel like I don't have a choice, because 10 years of entrepreneurship has been easily the biggest roller coaster of my life. The ups, the downs. You know, when I was flying airplanes and doing engineering, I was in control of everything in my life. There was nothing out of control. Yeah. And in 10 years of entrepreneurship and real estate, it's like nothing's in my control. And that has been, that has taken me to my knees. You know, former control freak now is not allowed to have control. I'm like, okay, sweating a little. But the mental resilience, I just felt like I never had a choice, because what's my option? Go back to corporate and figure out business casual clothes. Like I can't, for me, the business casual clothes is almost more than deal. Like I have to wake up early and look a certain way. Like that sounds like my worst nightmare. Yeah. And absolutely. So my craving, I mean, I don't want to say it's an addiction, but kind of like I have to have that so bad that I'm willing to go through the hard stuff. But you know, so if you have that inherent, like, have to get out, can't do this, it's super helpful. Totally. Because otherwise it's tempting to go back, right? Where it's easier. Because then you're like, well, I got a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, like whatever, you know, I've got a fallback plan. And I think the big thing, you know, outside of that is really kind of like I was saying before about the reframing of not looking at things like failures, or again, you know, some people will buy a rental property and the first year they lose 10 grand, you know, during COVID, especially, this came up a lot. People had just bought rental properties and now their tenants weren't paying because of the eviction moratoriums and all that. And they're like, oh my God, I lost $10,000 on my rental property in the first year. I got to get out and whatever. And it's like, I hear you, but it's having the mindset going into it to understand that in the long run, that 10 grand is not going to matter at all. First of all, you're going to write it all off, but then it's not going to matter at all. And I think the absolute key for me that I was doing before I left corporate was reading books that taught me a lot of the mindset. So I read the whole Rich Dad series, maybe not the whole thing, but a lot of it. So for both entrepreneurship and real estate, when certain challenging things happened, I had already read about them. I was like, oh, that means I'm on track. Yeah. You know, it's about perspective. And I was prepared mentally, because I think had I not read that, you know, Robert Kiyosaki went through certain things and other big guys had gone through certain things. They're like, you know, even the sharks on Shark Tank, they'll be like, you have to not know where your rent payment's coming from in a month. You have to not know if you're going to eat. Like it's a rite of passage. So when those months would come where I didn't know if I was going to pay my rent or eat, I was like, oh, I'm just like Mark Cuban. It's good. You're like, Where if I didn't know that, I would have thought I was failing at something. Totally. So I think that's a big part of it. Inherent drive is very helpful, but I don't know that even that would have carried me through had I thought that all of these things were my own mess ups. You know, it's like, oh, absolutely. Well, Mark Cuban, Robert Kiyosaki, and like they've all been. I was like, oh, how successful am I? I just hit my rite of passage. It's so great. So it's the whole thing is a mind game. That's why I love so much talking about the mindset stuff, because everyone just tells you how to flip a house and go wholesale and do all these things, and there's no emotions in investing. Oh, but there is, because when you tell me a little more about that, the emotions. Yeah. Well, I mean, mostly from the mindset perspective, because it's stressful, right? Totally. Like anyone who says there's no emotions involved is lying to themselves, because it's the fear of failure that keeps people out. That's an emotion. It's fear being the big one. Yeah. If the challenges come up, it's not always about the logistical solution, because there's usually a logistical solution. It's whether you can weather the whole thing or not. And that is, maybe it's not like, happy and sad emotions, which those can come too.
Sure.
But it's a mental mind game. And this is for
Absolutely.
entrepreneurship as well. I had to play so many mind games with myself to even get through the first year. Cause I was like, this isn't going to work. I hardly made any money the first year. And I was like, nope, I'm going to set it up like an experiment. I'm going to take the pressure off myself. If things aren't working by December 31st, I'll pivot. But for now, pressure, I had to play tricks like that all the time. So maybe emotions isn't the right word, but, and I tell people sometimes, don't use the emotions, but like, let's say there's a slew of properties right in front of you and the numbers on all of them are decent enough. Well, how do you pick a property? Honestly, if you have some feeling in your stomach and you're super excited about a particular property, well, and even if the numbers don't work out on paper, like the house I was just talking about, on paper, that wouldn't have worked, the break even kind of thing. But, that was a different situation where I got into it. But you don't always know what the most profitable thing is going to be. So like, don't rule out excitement either. Don't just dive in and just like, oh, that one's really cute, I'll take it. Like run the numbers, do the analysis. And then after that, like if you're super excited about something, just follow it for a minute, see where it takes you. And this is entrepreneurship, everything. Yeah. No. And I love that too, because, I believe like I've looked into like manifestation and things like that. And, even beyond like the spiritual element of it, you focus your efforts on the thing that you want and you go harder. Like literally, if you're excited about a property, then you're probably going to be like, see a bigger vision for it and what you actually want out of it. And then you work harder naturally to get the results that you're looking for. And real estate's gonna be hard. And so like, you're going to hit the challenging times. So hopefully to some degree, you're excited about something about it because you need that excitement to get you through the harder times.
Absolutely.
And so I moved to California and you mentioned the spiritual side of it. So I ended up getting another master's degree in spiritual psychology.
So cool.
I originally just started.
What is that?
I don't know. And I have the degree. That is a good question. I actually only started it because I thought it'd be hilarious to say I had a master's in spiritual psychology and a master's in aerospace engineering because like total opposite ends of the spectrum.
Pretty awesome.
But that degree has turned out to be easily the most beneficial degree by a large margin for me because it's such practical application. Every minute of every day, I'm using those skills. But, with real estate, it helps me coach people because it is psychology. I don't care what people say, but there is so much psychology, and that it's just kind of what you're talking about is like bringing in the spirituals. And it doesn't mean necessarily the God side or whatever, but it's like the reframing, the perspective change, the willingness to go forward on what you're trying to do, regardless of, there's gonna be so many naysayers. Everyone's gonna say, oh, that's dumb. Don't do that. Here's the reason. Here's 7 reasons why you shouldn't invest in real estate. But if you're feeling it, go with it. If you get excited about a certain property and you can justify it, again, don't just dive in, without your floaties on, but like you run the numbers, it seems to pan out, go with it, you know? And what's the worst case scenario? If it doesn't work, cool, learn from it, move on. Again, don't risk everything you have if your family's going to starve, but whatever you can risk and you do it intelligently, I want more people to do it.
Absolutely. No, that's so cool. I feel like that would be so essential, diving into the spiritual psychology side of things, and because I mean, for me, I think it kind of takes a radical belief in yourself to be able to make this kind of thing happen, which, I mean, radical enough to where you're like, literally, I know that if I hold out long enough, something will pan out, And
but I think one of the big ones too is like, let's say you're investing and you lose let's say you lose $40,000 in a third world country. I don't know where I came up with that example. But let's say something happens and it's kind of a quote unquote failure.
Yeah.
A lot of people, and this is true for life in any regards, but even in real estate too, is a fail, quote unquote, happens. And instead of just seeing it as a failure, the person now believes they're a failure. So it's like, okay, so all these investors are super successful, which is a lie. Everyone messes up.
No, sure. Yeah.
So let's say you mess up with something stupid and it's something you should have known better. That doesn't make you a failure. I feel like I'm like now moving into the therapy couch kind of thing, but it doesn't. And so, but you'd be surprised how many people take that. Yeah. And so, I mean, kids, these kids today and their social media, you know, like a lot of teenagers are struggling because they see these overnight successes on Instagram. And because they're not an overnight success, they take that to mean that they're a failure. And it's like, you have to stop with that association of no matter what dumb thing happens or what thing you don't succeed at, it doesn't mean you're a failure, because when people take that belief on, they just won't keep doing it. It's
Absolutely.
Like when the $40,000 got lost, I never assumed, I thought real estate might be very frustrating and a dumb move, but I didn't take it to mean that I'm an idiot. It also helped that a lot of, you know, Wyndham and Nicholas and all those were in, because I was like, oh, it wasn't just me being an idiot. We were all duped, you know. If it was just me, maybe I'd feel kind of stupid, but you know, taking that belief and just throwing it under the table, no matter what you're doing, entrepreneurship, real estate, life. And it's just, you have to separate those things, because as soon as you take those beliefs on, you tank yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're like, well, I mean, it just sets you up to be like, okay, I'm never going to take any kind of risk and have a low sense of self-worth. And at the end of the day, like, you can look at failures as meaning, dang, I really pushed my threshold. Like I went out there and I did something that 99% of people would never even try to do. And it probably got me that much closer to what I'm looking for out of my own life.
I don't know if, is it someone in particular that says fail faster? Like, what's the thing in sales or whatever? It's like, you have to get 19 no's to get one yes, you know, out of 20.
Totally.
And so like, that was part of the mindset thing that I learned, you know, I took from all the books or whatever. So every time I would fail, I'm like, whoo, I'm getting closer.
You're one closer.
Like if the goal is to get to 20 and I need 19 fails to get there, I'm like, whoo, I'm so close. You know, and like, again, that's that mind, you know, even whether it's true or not, like, so your mind you can play tricks on it.
Absolutely.
Like, hey, mind, we got to fail 19 times before we get the big one. It was like, okay, like, sweet. We just failed. We're so close.
Yeah.
You know, like you got to play games.
Absolutely. I'm like doing that stuff nonstop. It's kind of fun. I'm like, oh yeah. Like, I'm like, oh, you know, 12's probably my number that I gotta fail 12 times before that actually works out. I'm like, so let's go ahead and knock them out.
It's like failed number 10. You're like, whoa, man, that's so exciting.
We're getting close. No, I love that. So outside of real estate, you know, when we did the intro, we were talking about like so many other things that you do. So how do you balance doing all these amazing things? Like, tell me a little bit, like you're flying airplanes and like doing lessons and like all kinds of stuff.
Well, the best thing now is aging. I have slowed down. I mean, not that I'm suddenly that old, but like in my 20s, I was balls to the wall. I was doing everything. Oh yeah. I was flying planes and doing the engineering and adventuring. And I mean, it was absolutely nonstop.
Yeah.
And now I'm just so content not doing the adventures. I think it's a personal growth kind of thing. Cause like back in those days, if I didn't have social plans for the week, I was a huge extrovert. If I didn't have social plans for the weekend, by Tuesday, I'd start getting nervous. Like, you know, and when I first moved to California, the city I was living in had nothing happening in it. And so I actually learned to do nothing. And it's one of the best things that I have ever learned. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure it just means I'm getting old. It makes it so much easier to balance everything because I'm not trying to do everything. But if I could change one thing about myself, I would like to structure myself more. I've seen I've had mentors and other affiliates and all that, you know, they break down their day, like 8 a.m., breakfast, gym 20 minutes, you know, and I can't imagine how much I would get done if I structure my day. But
that's something I struggle with too.
I'm so bad. Like I don't do it at all. And I wish that was me, but I'm just not. Like if I give myself a schedule, I'll purposely not do it out of rebellion. Like I know this about myself. And so I'm actually terrible at balancing all of it. But I've also kind of, knowing that about myself, I've kind of structured my life where I get to do what I want when I want. So I can just make, like for me, I have an office at the 10-year mark, I finally rented an office space for my company, and I'm not working up from my couch anymore, which is very exciting. But sometimes I won't go into the office until 5 p.m. Like if I have other stuff going on during the day, go in at 5 p.m. and I'll walk out of there at 11:30 p.m. And so it's about how to balance, you know, and I'm traveling right now and I need to be working. It'd be great if I was in the office the whole time, but life's short. I want to travel and see my friends that I grew up with. And so it's, again, looking at myself, what I know about myself in terms of working, and could I be more efficient? Absolutely. I can't even imagine what would happen if I would structure myself, but it's kind of back to coming full circle on, I could work 20 hours a day, but I don't really want to.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know, what's the balance there?
I mean, I think the balance is realizing like, you know, I'm trying to live my life the way I want to live my life and lean into my strengths.
Yep.
And because that's something I was like, oh, I got to get organized. And
Yep.
still, I got to get organized. But
and we're still here.
Yeah. But I was also like, you know what? Like, what am I really good at? And how can I double down on that so that maybe that'll compensate for some of the weaknesses that are around there, you know? So and that's been my thing is just trying to like, just lean into what feels natural so that and I think there's a difference between natural and comfortable. Yeah. You know?
Oh, 100%.
I think so anyways. And
I think you're one of the first people that brought up the natural thing. Cause like I put my first book out a couple of years ago and I have a whole section there about, you know, cause it's kind of like if you're trying to choose a real estate investing strategy, really looking at your strengths because chances are the things that you're strong at are the things you're also going to enjoy more. Yeah. Like there's nothing that I absolutely suck at that I love. You know, and so they kind of go hand in hand. So it's like, if you don't necessarily know your strength, well, what do you love doing? Because it probably is some kind of tied in there. Yeah, absolutely. But the natural thing, it's such a big thing that I wrote in the book is like, find what's natural for you. Because again, the whole thing's gonna be challenging anyways. The path is challenging. So like, find something that you're more natural at. Because if you're constantly swimming upstream, you're probably not ever going to be as successful as you would be if you're following something you're more naturally good at. Because, and the engineer in me came out in the book, I drew a bar graph and it's like, if I work on, let's say like I'm terrible at cooking and I also hate it, but I could take cooking classes. People tell me this all the time. I don't know why everyone's so invested in me learning to cook. And I'm like, I don't want to. Not that I'm not saying that I want to learn to cook and I'm just not doing it. I don't want to learn to cook. I have no interest in that. I don't know what everyone's obsessed with that, but it's like, I could take cooking classes for sure. And I would absolutely get better at it. But how good am I ever actually going to be? Totally. Whereas if I take something that I'm pretty natural at and I take lessons, I can send it through the roof. I literally drew the bar graph to whatever. So it's like, find the things that you're good at and expand those and outsource the rest. You know, it's not like I've done tons of things I'm not good at. Even now, like I would like to outsource more stuff. So it's you kind of have to do things you're not good at. But when you're focusing on because you can't do them all. So why not pick the ones you're good at? Because you're going to enjoy it more and you're going to succeed to levels way higher than if you swim upstream the whole time. Totally. And the cool thing is that whenever you do that, I mean, I, am lucky to get to talk to tons of different small business owners and entrepreneurs. And something that I always see is that whenever you lean into your strengths, then what happens is as soon as you start outsourcing some of these things, people will take your vision and they'll do it even better than you would ever do it. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Which is pretty crazy. So have you had the opportunity to get to outsource some of the things that my employees for Hipster right now, every employee that I have is doing what they're really good at. And all of the things that they're really good at, I am really terrible at. And so it's like, awesome. Some people in entrepreneurship, they're like, well, I don't want to outsource because I could save the money and whatever. And it's like, even let's say email blast, for example. So I've actually never even logged into my client database. I have someone who manages that. And if I need something from it, she gives it to me. Totally. I could do all that. I could manage the whole database myself, but is it the best return on my time? No, it's not. And she's really good at it. She can do it faster and better. And so many of the different things that my employees do, even if I tried to save the money and do them myself, I still can't do them as good as they are. Yeah. So it's like, why? And I hit on that a lot in my book too, is like the time value of or value of time. And I gave an example in it. I won't dive into it, but basically in the early years before I had a web guy, I was trying to figure out this problem on my website. I spent like 9 hours trying to figure this thing out. I mean, and if I assign myself an hourly rate, how much of my time did I just waste doing this? And I messaged this guy I had just been in touch with, kind of thinking about taking him on as a web guy. He solved it. I don't remember how much time, like in a minute and a half. And I was like, and he was in Romania at the time, I think. And he was like $12 an hour. So I just paid him like only a couple dollars to fix this problem. That I just wasted 9 hours of my life. And you're like, and I'm frustrated. I'm hating my life. I'm not doing anything that's going to make me good money. And I could have paid him for a minute and a half of his time and the whole thing would have been resolved. And so I love it. Like when I'm working with people who everyone's doing what they like to do, because at that point, I almost don't even have to act like a boss that often because everyone's self-sufficient. It's not like I have to be like, nope, bad, do this. They're just, everyone's doing what they're naturally good at.
Yeah.
And so it allows me to focus on what I'm naturally good at, and it takes all the stress off. So I think cool. it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool to create an environment where you get to empower other people to just do what they love and are the best at too.
Well, can you imagine if everyone in the world was just doing what they're good at and excelling in that? Oh my God. Like how many of us all the time are doing things that we're terrible at? We don't like it. We're miserable. It's making us unhappy. And if everyone had the opportunity to just do what they're truly good at, not to say, no growth, like, yeah, there's room for like train yourself on other things and totally expansion and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like, never learn something new, but if for the most part, we are all focusing on our strengths, not to go into like world peace or anything, but like, seems like we'd be making a good
we'd create a much better world for everybody, I think.
Because everyone would be happier for starters. And the production, I think, would be astronomically higher. Again, when everyone in my company is doing what they're good at, and it's things that I'm not good at, everything is at a higher level because I couldn't have taken it to that level myself. It's like cooking. I'm never going to be a Michelin chef. You know, like it'll never happen, no matter if I spend the rest of my life in cooking classes. I will never be Michelin grade. Yeah. Period. Yeah. So why not do the things that I can kind of quote unquote be Michelin grade at? Not again,
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean don't learn new things or test, get out of your comfort zone and do things that you're bad at. I've done that several times and it's embarrassing, but it's humbling and it makes, it makes me more well-rounded. So it's, again, not saying don't ever do those things, but when it comes to your company or investing and, the best example, turnkey rental properties. If you look at turnkeys on paper and you had told me before I got into them that would be my ticket out of corporate and that would be the ticket for the next 10 years of my life, that doesn't make any lick of sense at all. There's nothing about turnkey rental properties that would suggest this. But again, it just was the natural. I'm so natural with turnkeys that it became that level of success. I didn't pick it. I'd rather be good at flipping. It sounds more fun. But I'm not. And so again, I could go flip properties, but how successful in the long run, how much success can I have compared to sticking with these adorable little frustrating turnkeys? It's just my thing. And so I'm going to follow that. And it's worked. Absolutely. Again, it doesn't make sense on paper, but again, following that all the way back to what started this whole conversation is doing what's natural. And turnkeys are really freaking natural for me.
That's such a good way to explain it too, leaning into that because that's something that I realized is, and people might have a vision of what they think they want to do, but also, it sounds like you became extremely open-minded too, whenever you're getting into this process of working with primarily, turnkeys, because, if somebody came up to you and right at the beginning of it or before you even thought about it and told you this was what was going to happen, you'd be like,
even when I started investing, I was doing the Nicaragua stuff and the guys they were already working with turnkeys and they threw turnkeys at me a couple of times. I was like, I don't care about that. Like I want this beach bungalow. I want beach bungalows. I don't care about little rental properties, like whatever. And sure enough, the only reason I think I got into it was because Atlanta became one of the big markets and they were like, hey, listen, we know you've already said you could care less about turnkeys, but just a heads up, they're coming in Atlanta. And I was like, well, that'd be dumb of me not to look into them then because I'm from Atlanta. Like that would be easy. Like, and for $55,000, I'd be stupid not to follow that. And so it was really just by accident that I even listened because I was ignoring them for a very long time. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, and that's where I say like turnkeys kind of fell in my lap. Again, not that I didn't do any work for them, but I didn't pick it. I didn't, even when it was pitched to me, I was like, no, that sounds so boring. Yeah. And then suddenly they were not that boring.
That's so cool. So okay, I'm kind of shifting gears a little bit here. What's the craziest kind of scenario you've been in? You already detailed one of your crazy, scenarios that you got in literally today.
Is that the one that I just came from?
Yeah. Is that the craziest one? Do you want to talk about that? I feel like people need to know. I think people need to know what sometimes you get into as an entrepreneur.
I'm trying to think of the craziest. So this one, I don't know if this is the craziest as much as the most eye rolling. or I'm not sure exactly the emotion associated, but so this house I did not buy turnkey. This was my house.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so this was a little more sentimental because I lived in this house. This was,
oh my gosh,
I know. And so the short story, we've had a tenant. We thought his name was Steven for the last 2 years, 800 credit score, the whole thing. No problems, always paid on time. And then I think it was in April, there was suddenly something had to be repaired and suddenly there was a hole in the wall. And we're like, dude, you have to pay us for the hole in the wall. And this hole in the wall thing just spiraled into this chaotic mess. He signed a lease renewal because it was up for renewal, signs the renewal right before May 1st. And on May 1st, suddenly stops paying, which seems really stupid because he had his free out. He literally could have just walked out. So when he didn't pay in May, the property manager filed for eviction by, I don't know, May 20th or something like that.
Yeah.
And this has been a lesson learned for the property manager too, is at least in Georgia, and I would imagine this is the case in most states, is when there's an eviction underway, you legally can't enter the property because it's like some kind of conflict, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the property manager had not gone to the property because they assumed we can't get on the property. Well, the lesson about that is go at least check on the property to see if it's vacant because we assumed this guy was still there. And normally in Georgia, the eviction time is like 30 to 45 days, super easy, whatever. But because of COVID backups, the last eviction they did in this particular county took 11 months. So now I'm sitting there, we're 2 months into it. I was like, I already have 2 months of vacancy. It's about to be 11 months.
Yeah.
God knows what's going to happen to this property while he's in it for the next 11 months. All of us just assumed he was there. So not only had he vacated the property, so we could have gotten in sooner. So this could have been done a while ago. Fortunately, my immediate neighbor called because one of my trees had fallen over the fence. And in this conversation, I referenced the guy who had been living at the property. He goes, a guy? What guy are you talking about? And I was like,
that's not a good sign.
Steven. The tenant. And he was like, no guy ever lived there. And I was like, who lived there? Because this is the only person on the lease. And he said, well, it started as 2 girls and one of the girls moved out. So it was 1 girl. Long story short, through the conversation with this neighbor, it became abundantly clear, God bless my little house, it has been a brothel for 2 years. And Steven never lived there. These girls it was one of those things at night. There were high-end luxury cars, new ones every 2 hours kind of thing. And I was like, I'm pretty sure my house has been violated. And there were parties. And so fortunately, because I'm thankful this tree fell over the fence. Cause in that conversation, he said, the place has been vacant for 2 months. I was like, wait, what? Because this is our in to avoid 11 months of an eviction. So I immediately called the property manager. I was like, gotta go over there. Because if it's vacant and they've turned any utilities off, legally that gives us, we can take possession of the property.
Okay.
So she was about to go over there anyways, but she said because they haven't had this situation really. So they're like, immediately when eviction gets filed, we're at least going to drive by properties and see if they're vacant. Yeah. Because had the neighbor not said anything, this could have gone on for 11 months. And so my little house has been a brothel.
Oh,
and
no.
I think the cool term now is like trap house or something like that. So when they finally got in the property, I was like, could it not have been any other property? It's the one I lived in. Yeah. Like that's I love that house. If I could pick it up and take it to California.
Sentimental value.
It has sentimental. The rest of them are just numbers. That one is,
of course it's that one.
I was like, and I have so many questions, but none of them I want answers to. And so it's in a turnover situation right now. But when they first went into it, first of all, they had left all sorts of food in the fridge and the cabinets. There were maggots everywhere. I was like, this is why people argue paying property manager fees. No, thank you.
Like, that's
just that reason alone. So I don't have to see that. 100% worth them all day long. Whatever your fee, take it.
Golly.
So the house could be in worse shape. But when they walked in, they saw all sorts of boxes for like expensive shoes and all that. So I don't know if or to what extent drugs were involved in the whole thing. But the Steven dude never lived there. And when I've told this story to people, I've since found out that this is a thing. I don't know if Steven is specifically the pimp or I don't know exactly the arrangement. I'm assuming he's some kind of pimp. That people will rent a house and they put the girls in it. And so I I can only assume these are consenting women. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
And the utilities were in a girl's name too. So like she even put the utilities in her name. Wow. And the water lady wasn't really supposed to give me that information, but she gave me her name. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I've never in my life heard of that person. So wow. I think this is a thing, but it goes to, and we actually just inspected the property, I think in February. So when we did inspections, I don't know if the guy would just go show up. I don't know how this all has worked. Yeah. But it has baffled everybody. It's not at all a neighborhood you would expect this to happen. But it's, it makes for a good story over a glass of wine when you're telling your friends. Everyone hears brothel and they're like, oh, that took a turn. And it's frustrating. It's super expensive. I mean, by the time I've been paying the mortgage and then all the repairs, it'll probably be just shy of 10 grand in total kind of thing. But again, as soon as it's rented, I can't even talk anymore, rented, the thought of my dear old house being a brothel, I can't even talk anymore.
Hey, it's okay.
Lose my function.
We can give a moment of silence for the house.
A little moment of silence for a little purple house. Yeah. So that's when I came rushing into here today. I just went over there. Normally I don't see I'm out of state. So I just happened to be in Atlanta. And so she gave me the lockbox code, and
I cannot believe it. I mean, I can, because I feel like as an entrepreneur, you're going to run into so many insane things, like no matter what. But that is the first time I've heard anything like that before. That is pretty mind blowing.
And it's been, because that's by far the nicest house I own, because the rest I bought as rental properties, and this was my house. So it's the nicest. Totally. And it's been interesting owning multiple rental properties of which ones perform. This kind of goes back to that, like, if you get excited about something, it might be worth going with. Because like when I bought my first wave of rental properties, I assumed, this one will perform the best, this one, whatever. It doesn't always work out that. Like I've got one also in Atlanta that has a homeless encampment next to it now. And it's been one of my best performers.
Totally.
God forbid that guy moves out and I have to rent it with a homeless encampment next to it. But, somehow, so it's, and this being my nicest house to end up being the brothel, it's like, I would have expected that on the super sketchy street, but but I guess this was luxury brothel.
Yeah. So. You're like, you just don't know.
You never know when you're going to own your own red light district.
Yeah. Dang.
Cool. It's but you kind of got to roll with it too. And, even thinking of the property management thing, like, again, people don't want to pay 6 to 10% a month to a property manager. Do you know how much time she has spent on this project between the eviction,
pays for herself, multiple
legal
times
fees?
Over.
Yeah. I mean, she just getting these contractors to show up and do their job. Yeah. She is spending, there's no way she's getting paid proper, not for my fees. She's got her salary, obviously, but me paying $100-something a month for a property manager, people argue it, but I don't have, it's not even just my time saving, it's my sanity saving, which this one's a sanity tester, but I'm from afar on the beach. Yeah. So exactly. I'm not in it, and I didn't have to deal with the maggots. So, again, that goes back to that kind of value of time and money. And, I put all my best ideas in the book. That's why I referenced the book. But my favorite chapter in there is, so I have a theory that there's 3 true currencies: money, which everybody knows about, time, and sanity. And I feel like people are looking at time more often because it's a conversation now of like, the value of your time, but people don't look at the sanity component. Never mind the time I would spend on maggots and brothels and evictions and all that kind of stuff. I lose sanity. I don't do well with all that stuff. Yeah. And so if I'm going to pay more, I'm willing to pay more money if it means I get to save my time and my sanity. Totally. And for different projects, those priorities may be different. I may be willing to spend more time on something in order to save money. And this is for life, not just investing, but it's something that everyone's got to look at themselves of what do you want to save more of, money, time, or sanity? Because you're going to pay for things in one or more of those 3 things.
And these are finite resources.
They are very
across
finite.
The board.
And money, it's funny because everyone always wants to save money. I'm like, money is almost more of the one that's not finite. Like you can get more money. You can't get your time back. And to some degree, you can get your sanity back, but you're going to spend money on therapy to get it. One could argue. We could get philosophical on that. But so sanity, you can kind of get back, but the time you spend stressed out, you can't get that back. No, and the stress, the damage that stress does. And I don't know about you, but I think that life is plenty stressful enough when I do outsource things that I want to save my reserves. It's like the sanity bank. Like I'm going to keep the deposits in there. I don't want a landlord. I have a local property I landlord, and it takes my sanity, but it's a mile away. So I can't justify a property manager. But again, it's not worth me saving money if I'm going to lose time and sanity. And I want more people. It goes back to the strains. Like if you're swimming uphill, that's definitely not that one. Swimming upstream or climbing uphill. Or swimming uphill. It's hard.
Absolutely.
So you're going to spend more sanity because you're not enjoying it. So when you're working to your strengths, you get to save a lot of that stuff.
So true.
So good turnkeys are great for that. But yay, brothels. Just when you think you've seen it all, that is a new one. And apparently not super uncommon. I'm starting to hear more and more. So heads up, just make sure your actual tenant's living there. I don't know the red flags for this. I'm not familiar enough. Like, is there something in his application?
I wouldn't know where to even start, He
had a great credit. Everything qualified. Like,
it probably would be completely undetectable,
Yeah, I don't know how we could have known that was happening. And again, we inspected the property once or twice a year. He pulled it off somehow. So
that's so wild.
But even more to that, like you can't prevent every problem as an investor. So you gotta I can laugh about a sad little day, but like I can laugh about it. Like,
absolutely,
this sucks, but
it's just another thing to adjust to, and another. I don't know. It's almost like another part of the story, you know?
Oh, like, it is. It's like, I want to do like a tales from a rental property owner. And I think that would be stories. Great. I've heard rental property stories. Any investing story can get quite entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Allie, in wrapping up, I always like to ask 2 questions. One of them is, what is a myth that you would dispel about being an entrepreneur, if there is any that you might dispel? And then the last one is, what's your favorite thing about what you do? So nothing too crazy. Okay.
Let's see. This is usually when I go into overthinking mode. I'm like, I want to come up with the best answer. Okay. So a myth to dispel about entrepreneurship. Here's one. I'm making this up on the fly, but it feels good. The myth being that being an entrepreneur is all about the business. Because I feel like anybody can make a business happen, supply chain or products or whatever you're doing. Yeah. The business itself is not the problem. Typically, it's the entrepreneur. It is an absolute roller coaster. And, like we were talking about the sharks say, like you have to go through the periods where you don't know if you're going to pay rent. You don't know if you're going to be able to do, buy food or whatever. And it's true. And in that moment, it's not about, it is about getting the products selling again. So you're making income. But for me, I think the myth is that the challenge is the business itself. I think it's the mindset because it will test it has tested me to no end, and it continues to test me to no end. I'm in real estate. It's up and down. I can have $0 months. And so I think that true entrepreneurship success, the challenge of it is not the business. It's the internal person, because not to sound cliche, but if it was that easy, everybody could do it. So it's like, if you're going to succeed, what are you going to have to go through to get there? So I think the myth is that it's actually about the business, because I think it's the entrepreneur's journey, whether you succeed or not.
Absolutely. So many people don't necessarily take that burn the boats mentality where they're ready to just commit to it 100% and do whatever has to happen, whatever you have to do to make it happen.
And you're going to get hit upside the head with a concrete block, and it's going to hurt. And so I've heard people say that all the time. And even when I hear them, I'm like, oh yeah, no big deal. It's when you actually experience it, you're like, oh, okay, that's way more serious. Because by the time, I'm sitting here and I sound all cheerful about it, like, oh man, the hard times are so tough. They're terrible. I sound happy about it, right? Yeah. Like, I'm like, they're fine. I'm good. I survived. I'm a happy, cheerful person. I'm not in those moments. No, and so that's what I feel like. By the time someone is telling the story of how challenging it was, they sound really cheerful about it. And so it kind of takes away from the true impact of it when it happens in the moment. Yeah. But it's
that's a great thing to share, because I know that there's lots of people that listen to podcasts and try to find resources out there to learn from people that have, walked in the shoes of a person that's been successful.
I think I just came up with a podcast idea for you. I don't know what you could call it, but like, get entrepreneurs and whoever you want to purposely call you when they're in it, like dark soul of the night, and just bring them in. Like you can even have a therapy couch if you need to. But like, if you could catch people in the moments that we talk about so cheerfully, like, oh, you want to paint pictures. Like
that would be amazing.
Cause like people think, it's like, oh, well, she figured it out. She's smart. But I don't sound very put together in those moments. I sound like I'm about to lose my mind. And my mentor, he one time, I'm one of those, I do everything myself. I'm super independent. So by the time I ask for help, I'm basically dangling off the cliff. And so he helped pull me back up from dangling off the cliff one time. And so we were kind of, great. Now we're going to move on. And he goes, hey, can I ask you a favor? He was like, just food for thought. He was like, instead of waiting until you're dangling off the cliff to ask for help, if you see the cliff coming, if you're not even near it, but you see it approaching, call me. He's like, you just don't have to that's
great.
I'm about to fall off the cliff. And so, but get people on a podcast who are dangling off the cliff.
That is such a good idea. That is such a good idea.
I feel like the word vulnerability should be in the title.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur vulnerable. It's some fun version of that. Like
totally. No, I love
those
that
are
idea.
hard moments.
I could just imagine too, because you're right. Every time we talk about it, everywhere, it's kind of like post-war.
Yeah, oh yay, it's so great. You'll love it. I promise. It'll be fine.
But it's like, no, it fucking sucks. When you're
Instead of having your coffee cup, you can have a big tissue box right here.
That's a good idea.
They're not going to be.
Okay, I'm definitely going to do that. And
and as someone who's not into emotions and vulnerability, I will not be showing up for that one. But I'll maybe I'll email you. I'm willing to email. But and you can just say, okay, she says.
Yeah.
Like don't make me show face.
On today's vulnerability corner, and I'll read like some. That. That'd be great.
I like that one. It's like no video cameras, audio only, so you can't see. Like I'll get red and splotchy, and the mess. Just put the mess all out there.
That would be. I think that would be amazing. I know I would get a lot out of that. So that's great.
Now, whether any entrepreneurs will show up in those moments or not, we're not as a forthcoming on emotions bunch. Typically.
I know. It is something because we're like, okay, let's funnel this back into what I gotta purpose all this emotional energy into something, and maybe we can create a vessel for people to relax a little bit.
What would be really cool of that, and this is a message for people, is like, I know, like when I'm dangling off the cliff and I call my mentor finally, and I talk to him and I have someone else who can see the forest through the trees. Cause in those moments I can't see the bigger picture. Yes. And so like collaborating with someone or having someone help me, I typically leave those conversations so motivated, just, I don't want to say fixed, but kind of fixed. Like I'm like, whew, I got action steps. I'm out of this dark soul of the night or dark night of the soul type of thing. And so like, it'd be cool. Like if people come in, cause you're an entrepreneur, having other people around, cause I work by myself all the time. So to be at a table with people who can relate, it'd probably be good for entrepreneurs too.
Heck
like,
yeah.
Again, whether you get them to walk in the door or not.
That's the hard part. Hey, we'll find a few brave souls out there, I think, to get this thing started. And maybe I'll just do my own one day.
Hey, get the ball rolling.
Because I know I have got all kinds of stuff ahead of me too. So
get yourself in a non-cheery. Put your like, oh, I'm gonna get on the microphone now.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, that does sound hard. Yeah.
After all that excitement, I forgot what the second question was.
Okay. Yeah. No. Second question. What is your favorite thing about what you do?
Oh, making my own hours and just the lifestyle design part of it. I was like, wait, there's a summary phrase for this. Lifestyle design. I mean, this sounds so minor, but it's been one of the biggest game changers ever. I'm a night owl. I go to bed when my body wants to go to bed, and I wake up when my body wants to wake up. And it sounds benign and lazy, but the energy that I have mentally and physically when I just go with the natural flow of my body, I get so much done at midnight. I can work at midnight and just crank everything out. Why wake myself up at 8 a.m. if I'm just a complete blubbering idiot at 8 a.m.?
Totally.
It's not efficient. So, but location independence, making my own hours. I'm traveling right now because I want to. I just have my laptop. I can keep up with work.
So
and that, I feel like it's one of those concepts, kind of like we were saying, like people talk with a smile on their face about the challenging times, which makes it hard to understand. But also like people talk about financial freedom, lifestyle design. until you've actually experienced it, I think it's hard. Conceptually, yeah, everyone knows super awesome. Like, oh yeah, I can travel when I want, whatever. But when you actually get into it, it's 10 times better than it even seemed on paper. And it was already pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And so hands down, that is why I go through the stressful periods and why I haven't gone back to corporate. In the early years, I wasn't making very much money. And my mom was like, would you ever consider going back to the engineering job where remember those Friday paychecks? Those were really nice. Yeah. And I was like, I'll sooner be homeless on the beach because I just don't want to do that. So the lifestyle design component, I spent 6 weeks in Mammoth skiing in January, and I just worked from an Airbnb. Travel when I want. I'm in Atlanta right now. Yeah. And going to Waffle House after this 100%. So it's that is, and it's something that I feel bad that I can't better describe how amazing it is, because it's kind of one of those things you have to experience to really get it. But it changed. You can spend all the time you want with your family, your friends. You can say yes to lunch invites, travel when you want. I mean, it changes everything, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people are getting more of opportunities for this because of remote work. Sure. Now it's changing a lot for people. So they're starting to kind of see
a taste of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you can then work your own hours on top of working from wherever you want,
there's no going back.
There's no going back.
No. Oh, that is so cool. Allie, you have given us so many cool insights today. It's been great to have you on. It's been, so informing. And I know that our audience, this is all the stuff that everybody's always giving feedback that they want to learn more about. So thank you for being so open and sharing your story. Is there anything you want to plug before we wrap up here? Where can people find out?
I alluded to the book. Yeah. And so that was my quarantine project during COVID. And it's called Not Your How-To Guide to Real Estate Investing, Life Lessons on Hacking Your Mind Before You Hack Your Wallet. And the idea was most of it in there, I feel like is applicable. We talked about working to your strengths, doing things like that. And a lot of those things are applicable to life. I just put it in context of real estate investing. And really my goal with that book was to make it a mindset book, like a prerequisite to the how-to guides. Like someone can tell you how to flip properties all day long, but if your mindset's not in the right spot for it, I set it up to help people figure out a strategy. People get into real estate. Should you flip? Maybe, but some people shouldn't. Should you wholesale? I don't know. Depends. So I kind of help people work through that. So I set up a link for your listeners to get a free copy of the book.
Amazing.
Do you remember the link? I'm going to look it up. So my company's name is Hipster Investments. So if you go to hipsterinvestments.com/gem, GEM. I was like, the shortest one I have.
You got your part and I got my part in it. So
we're tag teaming.
We'll add it into the description on this too. Perfect. So everybody can have it.
Yeah. So if you go there, you can get a free digital copy. If you're like me and you have to have something in your hand, there's a link to the Amazon link, listing for it. And then through that, if you go ahead and put in for that, then it opens you up to all my contact information. Reach out. I love saying hi to people.
Awesome.
I've been doing tons of real estate investing coaching, even outside of turnkeys. And that's been my new favorite thing is, especially if you're getting started, if you're overwhelmed, whatever. Yeah. So there's coaching information, basically anything I can help you with, just start at that link and it'll give you all the info.
Wonderful. Well, everybody go say hey to Allie.
Please do.
Yeah. Thanks.
I work by myself. Say hi. I need people.
Totally. All right. Well, hey, this was an episode of the Gem series. Stay tuned for more from Allie. So much more that's going to be coming out, and have a great day. Bye. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Gem series, the podcast for anybody dedicated to investing in themselves. If you would like to see the resources mentioned in this episode, learn more about what we are up to at Rocket Level, or come over and join our team, just click on the links below. Until next time, this is Blake Chapman, and remember to be awesome and do awesome things.